Hey, welcome everybody to the very first Is There More to Life Than Netflix? My name is Dave, and this beautiful person next to me, I say next to me in Derby, is Andy Bond. And basically we're gonna hang out every night on YouTube and Facebook, not every night, sorry, every Thursday night at 8. To talk about meaning of life and all that kind of jazz. We're both ordained with the Church of England. We're vicars, believe it or not. And so we just wanted to introduce ourselves a little bit so you know a little bit about us. So we are streaming on Storyhouse, Facebook and YouTube, and I help run Storyhouse alongside a wonderful staff team. But more importantly, I am also the kind of vicar of Storyhouse. So Storyhouse is a coffee shop up in Liverpool and also a church. And obviously we've not been able to do much coffee shopping recently, doing a lot of church type stuff instead online, as much as we can do. And a lot of that's been quite churchy. So we wanted to give you something that was a bit more for everybody else, that you could connect with, ask us questions, all that kind of thing. But let me introduce you to the wonderful Andrew Bond. Andy, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, where you are and how you got to be where you are?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Privileged to be with you this evening. It's not normally what we spend our Thursday evening doing, because we're not directly opposite. You're up in Liverpool, I'm in Derby. So a quick version of my story, I suppose, would be grew up in a household where church was part of life, and always went to church. But I guess there's a point at which you have to decide whether you continue to do that, whether it's just kind of inherited faith or whether it's something you really believe. And there's a period about 6 months when I was 16, and faith, I often describe it as people kind of going from my head to my heart. It kind of, God turned up the spiritual temperature. This stuff became real. It wasn't just kind of something my mum did. It was something that I was like, oh my goodness, God's real and he loves me and wants a relationship with me. And we began to see exciting things happen in our church youth group and all that sort of stuff. And that then flowed on to many years later, training to become a vicar. So for a little while I did pensions, which I wouldn't advise to anybody, but that's what I did for a few years. And then we met, didn't we, Dave, actually, in 2011.
We did.
Training to be vicars. You kind of go to vicar school, you go in normal, and then they train you, you come out a vicar. And that's what we did. And where are we now? And so now we're in Derby. So you kind of do lots of training stuff. And then we ended up moving to Derby to be part of a team that started a new church. And we've been here for about 2.5 years. And the plan is we're going to go in the next few months, going to go and take a bunch of people from that church, and then go and launch something new at another church on the edge of Derby. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Awesome. Yeah, and as you say, we're at Vicar Factory together in Cambridge, where you go in normal people, you come out vicars. It's quite an amazing thing. And yeah, so like your background was pensions, mine was IT. And it's always good to remember that, you know, these weird vicary people you meet are also regular human beings, or at least were until we went into the Vicar Factory and came out weird. But basically, the reason we wanted to do this tonight is, you know, we've had this same experience of like since the whole pandemic thing and the whole crisis thing happened. It's been a lot of people asking a lot of questions about spirituality, meaning, life, all that kind of stuff. And there's not really been that many places for regular people to go to kind of figure out what that stuff's all about. So if you know where to go and the people to find out, then you're absolutely set. But if you've just got some questions about this stuff, you don't believe it, but you want to chat about it, you know, whatever that might be, there's not many places to do that. So we wanted to do that. And literally we have so little of a plan tonight. Like we literally like turn on the cameras, have a chat to you guys. So, you know, this will go really well if people pop questions and comments down below. And if you don't, then it's just going to be me and Andy rambling to each other the whole night, which we'll have a great time, but maybe you less so. So do throughout the evening, pop your thoughts and comments and questions down, and we'd love to get you involved in the chat. But first, what we wanted to do is talk a little bit about where this title came from. Is there more to life than Netflix? And it's simply this, that we've all had our lives kind of turned upside down and shaken. It started making us think about, what's life about? Am I spending my life well? All these kind of deep philosophical questions that are actually quite difficult to think about. So what we'd prefer to do of an evening is stick on Netflix and order a Domino's, and just kind of eat all of those emotions and hope they'll kind of disappear. And I think that's kind of like where most people have gone. They went into lockdown thinking, maybe I'll discover myself and find out what spirituality is all about. And actually, they just worked their way through Tiger King or something like that instead. And so like we wanted a kind of easy access way to talk about, what is life all about, and it's got to be more than Netflix, surely. And in fact, like Andy, you messaged me a great quote about this from Twitter the other night. I don't know if you've got it on you.
Yeah, no, I've got it to hand. So there's a guy that's in the kind of Christian world is quite famous and kind of goes and does talks about all sorts of stuff. And there was just something he said, really. And he said this. He said, "I'm absolutely convinced that meaningless does not come from being weary of pain. Meaningless comes from being weary of pleasure. And that is why we find ourselves emptied of meaning with our pantries still full." Now, I guess if you live in a vicarage, you might have a pantry. The rest of us probably just have a normal cupboard. But there's that thing, isn't there? I think, like you're saying, Dave, that for many of us, Tiger King or, I've been watching the Chicago Bulls documentary like the last few weeks, and that's kind of where we go to. And yet actually, and I read this article the other day, was talking about, kind of people's outgoings. So our outgoings, kind of going out for coffee, which, you people used to buy stuff in your shop, or, we kind of go drinking with friends, or, for our kids, my kids would be dance lessons or swimming lessons, all of that stopped. And so you've got no outgoings that way, but your food bill has suddenly jumped to, thousands of pounds per week. So, yeah. And
first of all, I can totally empathize. Like we are like our drug of choice is we're working our way through the American Office, which, unlike the British Office, has like 9 seasons. And so it's kind of I think we're on season 6 now. Like, so we've not, in our house, we're not kind of like meditating on meditation pillows, or I don't know, whatever that thing is. we're not doing that. But we are, we do binging the box sets and all that kind of stuff as well. And I think we have kept Domino's going as well. Like, since this all started, there's just something about like whatever you can get your hands on, you get your hands on, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, no, I think for me, one of the other things I've been thinking about really in this season is that so often a lot of the things that we would look to for I suppose to distract ourselves, to amuse ourselves, like we talk about amusing ourselves, don't we, which literally means to not muse, to not think on. And football stopped, holidays have stopped, going out with friends have stopped, school stopped for kids. There's all sorts of things. Unless you're on the front line, I'm aware frontline workers are crazy busy, and also, but for many of us that's just not the case. And all the things that we would normally do to stop ourselves kind of thinking or reflecting have gone. And so there's been this choice, really. Do you really kind of reflect and ask some big questions, or do you order Domino's and watch Tiger King?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the quote that you read out before reminds me of this thing. I'm stealing this isn't mine, but someone was pointing out that we all know of Sigmund Freud, like the kind of father of modern psychiatry and all that kind of stuff. What we don't know is there were several different people competing to describe what human beings were all about at the same time, and they were all in the kind of same part of the world. And one of the lesser known guys, actually, he went totally against what Freud was saying. So where Freud was saying basically, like, we live for pleasure. That's our chief aim. Like, once everything else is sorted and we're safe and we've got everything we need, then we just indulge. That's what we live for. But this other guy came along and said, no, human beings live for meaning, and they will settle for pleasure when they can't get meaning. So actually, when we start binging, whether that's TV box sets or food or whatever it is, that's potentially because we're feeling there's not enough actual meaning in our lives. And so we're settling for second best, or, the easiest thing to reach for, rather than deal with those kind of big questions of life. I don't know, does that kind of ring true for you, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose going back to the amuse thing, it's about not thinking, not musing, not reflecting. It's not those things are bad. Do you know what I mean? Like, we'll do them, and a lot of people are very excited that the Premier League is going to be starting up again, and those things are not bad. Don't get me wrong at all. They're good things, and we can enjoy them. But I think that the danger is when something that you and I both love talks about, when good things become ultimate things, that actually these things aren't just good, but they become things that we live for. Whether it be football, whether it be going down the pub with mates, whether it be even kind of if we're fortunate enough to be married, or if we've got kids, fortunate enough to have children or whatever. Those things are good things, but if they become the things that we ultimately live for, they're going to let us down. Our team, if you're like me, you support Charlton Athletic, they rarely do well. A job, you won't get the promotion you want. Your kids, eventually they leave. Your spouse is never going to be everything. That's not going to fulfill everything, because we need other people. And so I think all those things leave us wanting, if I'm honest.
Yeah, completely. I kind of wonder whether, like, kind of pre-lockdown life, whether life was really busy, and so having a bit of a box set, or TV, sports to watch, or something like that, and take out and all that kind of thing, actually did make you feel kind of great, and did kind of take the steam out of the day a bit if you were knackered or whatever. But I wonder whether maybe for the first time ever, given that there is like zero other entertainment options out there, and the sports channels and web pages are just literally doing reruns and things, whether we've actually kind of, some people have maxed out on that. I don't know. Again, you might want to pop this in the comments if you felt like you might have actually maxed out on entertainment, and you're actually like, yeah, this isn't doing it. Like, there's got to be more to my life than this, right? And whereas previously it's just like life was going at too hectic a pace to actually stop it at all.
Yeah. Have you seen that, Dave, with some of the, because obviously you guys, your life has changed a lot, hasn't it? Because normally you were running the cafe, and you said that Storyhouse is both a cafe and a church. And I know, how have you found it in the last few months?
It's totally changed around. Like, so for one of the things I've found, and again, it'd be interesting to know if anyone else has experienced this, is it just really focused what life was about and what we should be doing. So like prior to this, I feel like my whole life was like this treadmill of just trying to keep things from falling over. Just like making sure everything opened and happened, and there was enough money in the bank, and and it was just like this treadmill. And like I was trying to do church alongside that, and it wasn't like particularly deep. Maybe like the time I was given to it was maybe not enough. And then once you took all of that kind of functional stuff out, and the treadmill and just the hectic pace of things, I noticed like the first few weeks I had time to do things like go running and clear my head, had time to read those books that have been sitting on my shelf forever, and started to like really appreciate them. Because prior to that, just be reading last thing at night when I was knackered and not taking it in. And now I was reading it while I was awake, and it was taking it in. And then that was going into my conversations with other people. And it's like kind of life just started to take on a bit more of meaning, like away from the kind of hectic pace of everything. So actually it was kind of like when you opened up this gap, there was a lot of healthy stuff that flooded in as well for me. That was just really, really good. I mean, I say that like after maybe the first 2 weeks, which were a living nightmare.
Trying to do what everybody's doing, kind of pivoting in terms of life, just completely changing and transforming. And it's interesting. I think there's been quite a lot of reflection, hasn't there, on blogs and online and the press, about new normals and normals changing, and what people want life to go back to. So we're well aware that, well, nobody really knows what it's going to be like, but it's not going to go back to what we remember at any time soon. Although we might be able to play basketball with 2 meters apart, I understand 3-on-3 now. Somebody messaged me earlier today, which is quite exciting, but I'm not quite sure how that will work. It sounds like lots of open baskets to me. But anyway, definitely people are thinking about not going back to what they had before. And I think, if it's, I'm sure it's like it where you are, but you go for when you had your daily bit of exercise. Now you've got unlimited exercise. Who would have wanted that unlimited exercise? But you could go for a wander, and you see lots of people jogging. You see lots of people on their bikes, and I don't think we'd have seen that before. So I think people are making use of the time in ways that perhaps they wouldn't have done before. and I think there's also, I mean, certainly the stats that you will have seen, I'm sure, to do with prayer, to do with engaging in church. So churches, normally we get, most of them get together in buildings of some sort, and we do all the kind of singing and the preaching and the praying. And some have been online, haven't they, over the years? But actually, almost every tradition, from very kind of traditional churches to much more modern churches to small house churches, have suddenly had to go. Most of them have just gone online. So I think I read something like 1 in 4 people have logged on to a church service, which if on a normal Sunday, if 1 in 4 people was in church on a Sunday morning in this country, I mean, we wouldn't be able to fit. It would just be absolutely insane. So I find that really interesting. I don't know if you've got any thoughts about what's going on there.
Yeah, I think it's really great. And like the initial, so I think there's kind of something that a lot of people have written about that I find quite helpful is kind of like the different stages that people go through in these kind of crises. And it's often written by people who'd been to war zones and stuff, and they'd seen this pattern over and over again, because a lot of us haven't experienced something like this. And they talked about, like, first there's going to be like this hero phase where everyone gets activated, the adrenaline gets coursing through their body, and they start doing stuff and helping and sacrificing and pushing and adapting, all that kind of stuff. And then you hit the kind of slump where you're kind of like, oh my goodness, this is it forever, I can't cope, and it's awful. And then you come through that to this kind of new life on the other side of things, where it's kind of like you've learned your lessons, you've found a long-term kind of rhythm that's sustainable and all that kind of thing. And I think we're kind of like slumping now. That's the feel that I've got, is that people's adrenaline has kind of run out a bit, and you know, the initial energy they had is becoming angsty, and they just want to get on with things now, and it's just it's getting a bit slumpy. And I think, but what I didn't see anyone write about, and I think it tallies in, is that what you and I saw, and like thousands of churches around the world saw, was this openness to spirituality within the hero phase. Yeah. So it's kind of like within that heightened phase, that's when they were Googling prayer, that's when they were checking out church online, all that kind of stuff. And I guess what I'm afraid of, and what I'm wondering is happening now, is along with the slumpy bit, are people now starting to kind of like just literally settle into mindless binging and all that kind of thing. Like, I don't want to think anymore, I haven't got the energy anymore. And actually, whether like a lot of the energy and the potential of that moment is starting to kind of slip away again, which is again part of, I think, our thinking for doing this now, is actually don't lose this moment when you can actually ask these big questions about, what is my life actually about? When I look back on it, whenever it ends, am I going to be proud of how I spent my time? What is a life well spent? What's not a life well spent? All that kind of stuff. And we want to like talk about those questions each week. And I know a lot, like we've both done the Alpha course, haven't we?
Yeah, many times.
many times. Which is this kind of like introduction to Christianity type course, and you have
thought I would pass by now, to be honest. But there you go.
Yeah. And you do all that discussion and all that kind of stuff. And every time we do it, there's always, people always have questions about this stuff that they always think, oh, I can't ask that, or they're a bit embarrassed or whatever. But it's nearly always, the same 5 questions or whatever. It's kind of, it's pretty, like, everyone has these kind of very similar questions, but everyone thinks it's not okay to ask it, or they shouldn't ask it, or they don't know who to ask. And it's just like, Thursday nights at 8, like, here's your chance, ask those questions. So if you do pop a question in the comments right now, we will be talking about it in the weeks to come.
Because I think one of the things, when we were talking about this as well, we've just been chatting generally, there's often a feeling of, this is a stupid question. This is too small, or I'm going to look like an idiot if I ask that. And I get that all the time in Alpha, but I also get that, and we get that at our church, because we're very fortunate. We have new people there every week, and sometimes, in fact, quite often, they're people who haven't been in church either for a long time or have never been in church, and so they're like, why are you singing so much, or what are you doing when you pray, or and even within church as well, like people that have been in and around church, there's kind of language that that gets used, and there's reasons for it, because we're trying to describe things that are pretty indescribable sometimes, or pretty specific and different to another world. And if I went back to your workplace a few years ago, Dave, and you started showing me around your workplace in IT, and you started explaining stuff to me, I'd be like, mate, I haven't got a clue what you're talking about. And because there's a specific language there, but every world has its language, and I think sometimes that can make church and faith and the Christian faith quite inaccessible, for to people. And I guess one of the things I always say is that there's no such thing as a stupid question. Like genuinely ask it. Why would we expect you to know? If you've never been here or you haven't been here for years, just ask it. Like, I'm sure if you're thinking it, somebody else in Alpha, because you tend to do it in groups, you'll have half a dozen people maybe. And I'll say, look, if you're thinking it, somebody else in the group is thinking it, and they're not going to be brave enough to say it. So if you say it, then you're doing them a favor, really.
Yeah.
And I guess our hope is that we could create a bit of a space where you could ask that, like whatever's kind of going through your mind, or kind of got questions like, what's that about? I don't get this. I've heard this. Is this true? I've read this on the internet somewhere. A friend of me forwarded this meme. Whatever that might be. We can't promise to have all the answers, because we don't have all the answers, but there's often we sit on 2,000 years of people that have done a lot of thinking already for us, and we've read a little bit of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of it though, right?
Well, there is. I mean, just a few weeks ago, I was reading a book, talking about the Middle Ages, and I don't know about you, but it's not a time I read about a lot, Dave. And you're going, oh my goodness, these guys knew what they were talking about a lot of the time. They thought about things, like they were answering questions I haven't even thought of. But most of us are not going to go to what somebody in the Middle Ages has written, or somebody 1,500 years ago. It's not our natural place. We're going to go to Google or Quora or whatever it may be. Which might not provide the best answer.
Yeah. Okay, so I got a comment from Fran. So she's been focusing on kind of healthy mind, healthy food, healthy daily prayer, listening to books on Audible. That's a good shout. All of which has really helped her, and all of which she was putting off before. So this is that thing we were talking about before, is actually some people are using this time to kind of actually explore those parts of themselves that maybe just got put on hold before, just in all the craziness and the busyness. That equally says there's got to be more to life than just binging box sets.
Yeah, no, sounds good. I think the Audible thing's good as well, isn't it? Like it can be easy to be a little bit kind of pompous about how, I know some of us struggle with reading, reasons it's not our thing, and yet actually we live in an age where we, if we've got access to technology, we can listen to things, which I find, I'll sit and do that when I'm doing the washing up, or I'm going for a run, or at the gym. Quite often I'll listen to things, which can be great.
But here's the thing, right? So here's what I'm thinking. You've got, this lockdown thing happens, shakes life upside down. We've got people searching for prayer like never before. We've got, Russell Brand talking about it, even imagine that. And then you've got things like, number of Bibles being sold going up by 50% in a month. 24/7 Prayer, which is this organization, is all about prayer. Their website gets absolutely flooded. Like you were saying, tons of people like going to online church, which is interesting. That's an instinctive response. Like no one coordinated that. There was no PR campaign or anything like that. It was like moment of crisis. Everyone went and did that. And I don't know, I'm not a historian, can't say, for definite the last time this happened in the UK, but I can imagine like one of the last times anything like that happened was the evacuation at Dunkirk, because when you look at the history of that time, people just went nuts. They were kind of like flooding the churches and praying like never before, and like a whole bunch of amazing stuff happened seemingly as a result of like these hundreds of thousands of people praying. But has it been that long since anyone in the UK has experienced that level of crisis that would kind of drive them back to faith? But it's just really interesting that is, like the same way with like the funny bone test, if you knock the right point on the knee, like the leg flies out. It's almost like this crisis kind of hit something in humanity, in the UK public and worldwide public, that just instinctively went rushing back and looking for God. And that's got to say something about what human beings are made for, right? Like if it's that instinctive and then built, does that kind of say something about who we are and how we're made?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I know there's a phrase which people use which talk about there's no atheists in foxholes, and I know atheists get really angry about that because, or at least some do, because they'll say, if I was in a horrendous, and basically that phrase is saying, look, if you were in a really bad situation, you're going to turn to God, even if you're a committed atheist. And rightly, I think some atheists, as I say, would say, well, actually, no, I wouldn't. But there is a sense, isn't there, that in moments of desperation, people, there's a, as you say, there's a hope, there's a longing there. And I guess as Christian, as vicars, we would say, actually, if there's a desire there, then in that sense, there's something to fulfill it. So C.S. Lewis, who wrote Chronicles of Narnia, would talk about, you're hungry because you need to eat, you get thirsty because you need to drink. And actually, if there are desires in you which nothing in this world will fulfill, then actually perhaps you're made for another world. And I think in moments like this, they force us to the insulation that would normally be there to stop us doing that goes. And I guess certainly in yours and my lifetime, and I think I'm just slightly older than you, but I think in our lifetime we've certainly never seen anything that's shaken us. Like you see stuff on the news, which is a long way away, and you're aware that stuff's going on, but basically you assume, tomorrow I can go to the shops. If I plan my holiday in a month's time, if you're fortunate enough to have one, you can go on holiday. You better get a flight wherever you want if you've got the money. Basically life will continue, and it has a rhythm and it has a pattern, and nothing is really going to disrupt that in any major sense. I mean, you have small things, don't you? You have kind of water shortages, you have trying to think of other things that have gone on, fuel strikes occasionally. There were kind of the riots in London in 2010, was it, or 2011, I can't remember, but there are kind of pockets of things that go on, and winters of discontent going back kind of before our time, but nothing, I think, where the whole of certainly the Western world, and then beyond that, really, because it's started in the East and now it's headed, to Latin America. Was it a quarter of the world's population was in lockdown, which is just mind blowing. And so that disrupts us, doesn't it, in terms of our day-to-day lives, and it doesn't surprise me that it has. I mean, it does and it doesn't. Part of me is surprised because we know what church attendance is like, and we, but on the other side, on the flip side, we know people, and I guess church can be really inaccessible, and so we're in a funny place. 15 years ago, what has happened wouldn't have been able to happen with groups and Zoom and all sorts of things, because the internet wouldn't have been there in the way it is. People working from home in this way, but for churches, suddenly people can go, oh, wait a minute, I can have a look. If there's some kind of link. They see an advert somewhere, they know somebody's put it up on their Facebook wall or advertised it on Insta or whatever it may be. There's a way in for hundreds of thousands of people who could just take a look in a way they wouldn't have done before, I think.
Definitely. And they go and looking, and again, it is interesting because you would think, spirituality would be almost like a luxury item, the way it's kind of talked about. It's like, once everything else is sorted out, once you've got enough money coming in and you've done all your hobbies and everything, then you might have time, to look in spirituality or whatever, like as a kind of add-on. But it was interesting actually in a moment where there was least safety, and you would think that people would actually be really concerned, about, which they were, toilet roll and food. But alongside that, people were also like almost primarily looking for the meaning of life, God, prayer type questions as well. Which got to say something about maybe our priorities aren't in the right place, and the way that we've been spending our lives has been maybe a bit misplaced so far.
Yeah, I wonder whether there's something, isn't there? It's interesting you talk about spirituality being an add-on, and we live in a culture, don't we, which we try to sell everything. If it can be monetized, whether it be streaming of music or streaming of film or streaming of games, or people sign up to dating apps, and anything that can be is kind of commodified. It's turned into something that you can sell, and I wonder whether there's almost a sense in which, because of the way that we are used to being able to log on and go in, kind of log on and buy anything we want if we've got the money. The spirituality is kind of chosen, a bit like that. I might choose a bit of the Christian faith. I might choose a bit of the Buddhist faith that I like. I might choose a bit of the Hindu faith, or maybe there's some other kind of my own personal thing, and kind of you mix it all together, or kind of, and you add it on to be an addition to who you are. And yet, actually, in this season, what we've seen in other ways is I know many people have been isolating alone, but for those with a family, suddenly family has become much more important. People are eating meals together for the first time. People have been cooking meals from scratch for the first time. People have, things that actually quite essential to human, flourishing, thriving, being the best, living well, have become far more central. And yet often they have been pushed out to the side because of career or financial gain, or just the stress of life. Those things kind of get pushed out, and so they've made an inroad back in. And it feels like spirituality, Christian faith, faith has also kind of come back in.
Yeah. We've got a bit of comment from, don't know if you know this person, Andy, Rachel Bond. Hey, Ray.
Never met before. No, who's she?
Watching from the next room.
Possibly.
Unless things affect us directly, we're good at continuing with life as it is. Yeah, definitely. I think so when I look around at kind of where I live up here in Crosby, soon to be Waterloo, it's like the best way I can describe how people live their life around here is like as a treadmill. It's just like everything's in place. It's like, and like there's almost like a 30-year plan, not like written down on a bit of paper, but if you wanted to, you could be like, this happens and then that happens and then that happens. And it's kind of like life is just definitely like, I guess I'm trying to think of a non-posh word, but I think the posh word for it's like unreflected. Like you just don't think about life, you just do it, and it's kind of like it kind of happens to you type thing. I think maybe that's one of the things that's happening with people right now is actually that's been interrupted. Like the treadmill broke, like and all of a sudden it's like, there's much more than I'm stretching the metaphor. There's not just the treadmill, there's the spin class over there and the weight machine, and I'm part of this bigger thing. That's a terrible metaphor, isn't it? But yeah, I kind of ran with that, but you get what I mean.
I think the treadmill thing works because it keeps going, doesn't it? And people talk about kind of being on the treadmill. And just this week, doing vicar things, I was taking a funeral on Tuesday, and the lady who was kind of in a crematorium, they got somebody behind the scenes that does all the music and all that sort of stuff. And it's really interesting talking to her. So she doesn't normally do that job. She normally works for the council. She does some other stuff, but because of all that's going on, they've had to come into different roles. And I was talking to her about it, and she was like, do you know what? I never would have thought I'd have done this, but actually, I'm not sure enjoy is the right word, but actually there was kind of real satisfaction for her in doing that. And she normally did something very different for the council. And I've heard a number of stories like that of people who have been doing a particular job, a role, something in life, and suddenly, as you say, the treadmill stopped, they've got off, and for some people they've got on not perhaps a treadmill, but they got on another machine, and they're like, oh, actually I quite like this way of living in a different way, whether it be career or whatever. And it's been a forced stop for people, or a forced change of direction, and I think it's going to be really interesting. I mean, just with the whole of life, it's going to be really interesting seeing what happens after that. Are there going to be lots of career changes? I think there's positive things. I think there'll be some negative things. I heard that in China there's been a huge spike in divorce rates because people are like, so there's positives and negatives, but I think Rach is right, and she's always right, almost always right, that actually, we you have moments in life, don't you, which cause you to reflect. So I think often people talk about births, they talk about marriages, they talk about deaths, maybe moving house, and then some of the harder things, like if somebody ends up getting divorced, or there are some things that massively change us, or can change us, because life doesn't continue at normal. Because things change so massively, you're forced to kind of reconsider. But other than that, it's not that necessarily people are anti-faith or anti-God. I know there are people who are, of course there are, but yeah, it's just something. I'm just doing what I'm doing. Do you know what I mean? And they just carry on.
Yeah, we've got someone I know also watching from the next room. Thanks, Liz. That we're drawn to comfort more than anything else. Yeah, this is. I mean, I've heard quite a few people say this. It's kind of like comfort's where we want to be, but discomfort's where like the growth happens. And basically, if you shoot for comfort, you get flabby. I mean, I'm literally flabby, but spiritually, emotionally, every way, kind of flabby. But actually, like the weird thing is that actually discomfort and really difficult times can be like the absolute best place for us, which is why Kate Ellis says exciting times in many ways. And we've got a shout out from Ray Blackham in St. Paul's Crystal Palace. Is that one of your crew?
Ray. Yeah. Well, it was back in the day, not Derby, but yeah, back in the day it was.
Yeah. Thanks, Ray, for the shout out. Lovely. So I guess going into the last 10 minutes now, then 5-10 minutes, the question would be are people going to change as a result of this? Or because there's kind of lockdown bingo, isn't there? Words like pivot, the new normal, all these kind of things, heard like a billion times. And that new normal one, like, will it be new or will it be a normal? Like, which one is it going to be? Because like I remember, people said, after 9/11, like everything changed. And like, did it like really, like day-to-day life, it just kind of means that going to an airport is more of a pain than it used to be. Like now it's just like it takes ages and it's it's a nightmare. But like that's changed, and there was a brief resurgence of like the new atheists and stuff, and they're definitely on their way out. They're not the trend, certainly not trendy anymore, and they seem to be in the decline. And so it's kind of like, did anything really change from that? And then we know that we had the financial crash, and basically a whole bunch of financial institutions were just gaming the system and being completely illegal. And then things did just basically go back to the way they were. So like, we say new normal, but actually, will it be any different? Like, will people change in any way? What do you think?
Well, I feel like I need to kind of prophesy something or kind of predict something. That's why, yeah. No, I do. It's quite fun, isn't it? But I think that for me, there's a question around how long and how much things will change. So I think 9/11 obviously massively influenced New York, and it massively influenced world politics, in terms of the wars and things that came out of it and the way that, different things went on. And I think the financial crash of 2008 influenced the city to a degree, but then obviously was bailed out massively by governments, and they didn't let things fail. And you can argue, I mean, I'm no economist, so you talk to other people about that, but it meant that therefore on the ground, although there were impacts, I don't think it impacted people's day to day. And I think the way that this is different is it is impacting our day to day. You're queuing up longer to go to shop. Shops are just not open, but people are shopping once a week. People are not commuting. Some people's jobs have gone, businesses have failed. People have changed careers. All of those things. And so I think it's kind of how long and how significant a change is it? And also, nobody knows about second peaks or any of that stuff. So I think if we come out and things, kind of gradually go back to where they were before, I think there'll be some impact spiritually in terms of faith and things. But I think if we end up, and this is not what I would want, and certainly not what I would hope for, or any of that sort of stuff. But if we end up in a kind of a season of a number of years of international travel just kind of being decimated, of kind of peaks and troughs of this thing, kind of lockdown and coming in and out, I think there will be a spiritual impact. I really do. I can't see how there won't be. Although it's interesting how quickly we re-insulate ourselves. I mean, I think you were saying about the different phases of what we've gone through, and those windows. And again, if you're a skeptic, then you'd say it's a crutch. There's moments when you feel like you've got a broken leg, therefore you need a crutch. And then once your leg starts working again, you get rid of the crutch. But if you're a Christian or a person of faith, I think you'd say there's a window of it's two metaphors, but there's a window where you remove the insulation, and then when it kind of goes back up again, and or the window opens and then the window closes, or and so it's interesting to see. I've kind of waffled a bit, but I think that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, and I'm gonna pick up on a comment from your wife again, Andy. I think like maybe the wives should be doing this show.
Just thinking about that.
Rachel. So Rach says, I thought about the quote from Hotel Rwanda: as the media leave and they say, when you get home, tell them what's happening. The media from the West, they'll hear and then carry on eating their dinner or something like that. She's saying, do you remember the exact quote, Andy? Did you watch Hotel Rwanda?
We did, but it was a few years ago before lockdown, so I can't remember exactly. So she talked about, basically about, when everybody's watching, it changes and then it goes back.
Yeah. We've got some more comments coming in now from Giles. Loving hearing two vicars having a chat. Is there something about feeling insecure when life, which is normally mostly under our control, suddenly isn't? We're suddenly faced with the question, well, who or what is in control? Where can I find security now? Yeah, that's so good. That's so insightful.
Just get Charles on next week.
Yeah, let's get nice one, Charles. Yeah, spot. There's a guy called John Montcomer who is like, he heads a church over in Portland in the States, and listens to a lot of his stuff. And one of his observations from this time, which I thought was really quite profound, is like, he thinks like all of us in the Western world, like UK, Australia, America, all that, we have real issues around control. Like we genuinely believe we're in control, and we're not used to not feeling like we're in control. But the whole thing is, and this is quite deep, like that sense of control is actually an illusion, and we're only in control of a tiny fraction of what we actually think we're in control of. And it's kind of like the screen's been pulled back a little bit, and it's shown for what it is. And I definitely like when we're not feeling in control, then all of a sudden it's like, what is life about? Who is in control? Like, what is going on? And then got one from Emma. Hey, Emma. Lovely to have you with us. She says, I hope from this, some parts can be the new normal. I've finally gotten to know my neighbors, building relationships in the community, and we even have a street WhatsApp. The little things, but it's been important to know that 85-year-old Derek in the road can ask us for help and get us to go shopping. The feel of new bonds of trust we're seeing in one another helps us to trust in God in these testing times. That's amazing to hear that, Emma. I know that's been, I know a few people who've had like street WhatsApps set up, and I know the clap on the street that we live in, there was a moment where met a couple of the neighbors for the first time. We're already on really good terms with one of our neighbors, and we've got to know them really well during this time and really started to help each other out. And it's definitely that'd be it'd be great if that carried on kind of after all this. You had any experiences like that, Andy, of positive signs, good things coming out of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. We've got involved in some work with some of the food bank stuff in Derby, and just seeing that connection happening with people. All sorts of different people volunteering and helping out, and there was already food bank stuff happening in the city, but there's been some extra kind of short-term provision that's going on in relation to this, and it's people of kind of the Christian faith, but lots of other people from the community getting stuck in, and that's been really cool. And I think, like you say, just those stories of people helping out their streets, and I think for us as a church, I think one of the things that I think has been most positive is we've had a lot of interviews with people in different parts of life. So we've had an interview with somebody from the hospital. We've had an interview with somebody in manufacturing who's been making, ICU stuff. We've had interviews with a kind of international student. There's been lots of different roles, people who just started the marriage course. And so often church can be quite upfront, and so that's been really, really great to see just kind of more of those things. So I think it's caused a lot of people to innovate, and I think it's caused the church to innovate as well.
And that's got to be a good thing. Kind of like, I think with quite a few churches, it's with one arm behind their back, kind of the gun to their head, like you will innovate. Okay, so Right.
Typing away there, Dave. I can see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, yeah.
Advanced. There we go. Yeah, so that's how prepared we are. I was so prepared. Look at that.
Amazing.
If you've got
As if by magic.
Yeah, seamless. Like, yeah. If you do have any questions for the future for me and Andy to talk through, chat about, then do pop them in the comments below. That even when the video is finished, or if you're watching this later and you're not watching it live, just pop it in below, and we will pick up on those questions and we will talk about them in the future. So for the last kind of 2 minutes, while you have a think about what question you'd love to ask a vicar, because I know you would, I'm just going to ask Andy, and I'll say myself as well, what are some of the common questions that people ask? Because I know there's like 4 or 5 that come in like a lot of the time. So I know like nearly every time when people finally open up and ask the question, there's always something around like, why do people suffer? Why do bad things happen? Like, why are the natural disasters? Why do children get sick? All that kind of stuff. So that there's always something around that. So maybe it's something like that for you, that kind of thing. What are some of the other things that come up a lot for you, Andy, that people ask?
It depends. Yeah, it depends what stage they're at. I think the suffering one is always in there. I think there's sometimes something when people are really investigating faith, there's something around reliability of the Bible. Is it just fairy tales? Sometimes there's specific questions in kind of in relation to the Bible. Is it oppressive? There's those kind of things. There's often sometimes things around science and faith. Can science coexist with faith, or kind of do you have to throw your brain out to become a Christian? Yeah. So I think some are kind of more head questions, and then some are more kind of heart questions. Yeah, and I think, just to reiterate, there's no question that's too small. Dave and I are not about highbrow. So genuinely, any question that you might have been embarrassed or think that sounds really stupid, just throw it in there, and we'll give it a go at trying to respond to that.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we're going to be back here again, 8 o'clock Thursday night next week. If you want to pop whatever question that is in the comments, either live or later on if you're watching later on, and we'll talk it through. Anything you want to talk about at all, we've heard it all, so let's have a good chat about this stuff. And if you know anyone else who would benefit from this, who've got their own questions, send them our way, or send a message through the Storyhouse Facebook or through our website, and I'll make sure that Andy gets to hear it as well. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves, and we will see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining us.
See you later.
Okay, and by the magic of internet technology, we will disappear. See you next week.